It's 2 a.m. in the vast Indian Ocean. The human-made lights from the giant massive cargo ships move before the moon with great determination. The suddenness of chaos. Close by, 30 knots of a speedboat with AK-47s raging on the prowl. Distress calls were being sent, but within minutes the masked gunmen came storming onto the scene. A few minutes later, they took effective control of a ship worth millions. Captain and crew, powerless. Ransom, sky high. And no one could stop them for years. An era of terror when the pirates of Somalia began their reign over the Indian Ocean. But some questions arise on how. What prompted fishermen to turn into pirates? What would cease their onslaught? Let's now take a deep dive into one of the world's most dreaded syndicates in the 21st century. To understand how Somali piracy became a global crisis, we need to consider how earlier events in the early 1990s occurred. Somalia was a place of bedlam. After the fall of the regime in 1991, law, order, and indeed a navy were left to crumble in the country. This made it very plausible for foreign vessels to make use of Somali waters. Shortly after that, massive fishing trawlers started risking using Somali waters and decimating stocks. Money, however, was not even the least part of their report. Furthermore, reports started emerging on the dumping of toxic wastes in the oceans that spoiled the water and killed marine life. These foreign ships, under no government authority, operated freely in Somali waters, leaving none for the Somali fishermen. Desperation grew increasingly within these fisher folk until they manned themselves and began their attacks against such illegal vessels. Initially, they dubbed themselves coast guards and demanded fees for passage through their waters by these foreign ships. Slowly, they realized that ransom from hijacking ships was a far better business. Retaliation thus started on a very small scale and snowballed into a thriving, profitable criminal enterprise. Thus began Somali piracy, soon to develop into one of the multi-billion-dollar industries that would terrorize international oceans for years to come. Here are the visuals. Somali piracy had, by the mid-2000s, become highly organized and extremely lucrative in its enterprise. From having originally emerged as a last-ditch quarrel between a few fishermen contesting foreign exploitation, pirate groups armed with AK-47s, RPGs, and GPS technology perfected the art of commandeering giant vessels and demanding multi-million-dollar ransom. Their tactics in piracy, once they had access to modern speedboats and weapons, were simply straightforward down to business. They approached massive cargo ships and oil tankers in groups using fast-moving speedboats, fired warning shots into the ocean, and disembarked before the crew had a chance to react. Upon boarding, they took command of the vessel, sailing towards Somalia's coastline, where they would hold hostages for months, on occasions years, until the ransom was met. Evidently, piracy had become lucrative enough for villages sandwiched along the coast of Somalia to transform into hives of pirate activity. Local warlords would finance these operations, and international criminal networks would then enter the fray. Ransom payouts would amount to huge sums of money, often more than $10 million per ship. Pirates lived lavishly off this glamour, buying fast cars, building mansions, and bribing officials to overlook their operations. By the height of piracy in 2010 and 2011, attacks were being launched in hundreds across the length and breadth of their dominion, stretching out in the Indian Ocean. No ship was safe, even naval vessels. The world, in utter shock, watched as a misfit band of marauders from a war-torn country became the biggest maritime threat of the 21st century. Some pirate attacks jolted the newspapers worldwide. They were not mere random hijackings. These were calculated, high-stake operations, and the world felt their tremors. We take a look at 3 of the infamous cases. This is the story behind the Hollywood movie Captain Phillips. In April 2009, Somali pirates targeted the Maersk Alabama, an American cargo ship carrying food aid. Armed pirates boarded the ship, fighting the crew, one of whom captured a hijacker. In the ensuing melee, the pirates took Captain Richard Phillips hostage and fled in a lifeboat. What happened next was a dramatic standoff that lasted days. The U.S. Navy came to intervene with SEAL Team 6, and demonstrating stunning precision, Navy snipers took headshots of moving pirates on the high seas. Captain Phillips was rescued, and this action became a hallmark of the fight against piracy. The pirates had begun to graduate from raiding smallest ships to administrative piracy directed clearly at larger targets. In 2008, their audacity stunned the world with reports of the hijacking of the Sirius Star, a giant oil tanker laden with $100 million worth of crude oil. Truly the largest capture of a ship by pirates. Ransom? An astonishing $3 million. After a strenuous 2-month period of negotiations, the ransom was paid and the ship was released. But the attack sent a message clear, that even the pirates could hijack a vessel carrying a lot of value. This is one of several extraordinarily dangerous hijackings, where Somali pirates seized MV Faina, a ship of Ukrainian manufacture carrying 33 T-72 guns and heavy ammunition of Soviet origin. There were growing fears that these guns could end up with local warlords or even terrorist groups. The pirates demanded $20 million, although, through the course of negotiations, this was reduced to a down payment of $3.2 million. After détente for 4 months, the release of the ship and its toxic cargo was finally effected. Between the headlines and the ransom payment of millions lay an ugly reality, marred by violence and fear, with a toll of suffering. For the sailors whose vessels were taken, life became a nightmare. Most hostages spent months or even years in inhuman conditions. Some were tortured and starved, others were simply executed when ransom negotiations were not successful. Even amongst their own ranks, usually, life was dangerous. Their leaders would betray them. Others died in fights over ransom money. Others disappeared at sea. What began as a means of confronting illegal fishing has now become an industry run by greed and despair. At the very beginning of 2012, the world was fed up with it. Aggressive international naval anti-piracy operations were launched by the USA, NATO, and even China. Cargo vessels hired armed security, and there was a great deal of advanced surveillance technology. It was simply a question of time before the attack of pirates resulted in a significant drop. Then warships patrolled Somali waters to capture or end pirate groups. Payments of ransom dwindled. Piracy risked being suicidal. In 2017, Somali piracy almost vanished. Will it end or only be an awaited spell? Well, into many years past, Somali piracy seemed like finished stuff. However, the recent wave of attacks raises the alarm of a coming return. Economic hardship and political instability, as well as poor law enforcement, leave a perfect pedestal for piracy to easily spring up again. Hijackings are reportedly increasing between late 2023 and early 2024. Some experts raise alarms that, if it lingers in this state, piracy may come back in a resurgence more threatening than those before. This leaves behind the question, will the world act before it all spirals out of control once again? Once again, Somali piracy took the whole of the Indian Ocean. Will they come again? A matter of time, some say. What do you think? Can modern piracy evolve in entirely new and unexpected ways? If this is something that you have enjoyed thoroughly, go ahead and like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell so that you don't miss any untold stories from history's dark side.